5 through 9 in the Western Conference is set, and there was a surprise in there. Number 5 being the LA Clippers made sense to me. 6 was the Warriors, which also made sense. 7 was the Lakers, which made sense. But I was not expecting the Minnesota Timberwolves to beat the New Orleans Pelicans. The Pelicans absolutely controlled their own destiny. Possibly is getting, they could have gone up to the 5 seed, and now they're dumped at number 9. And the reason why the Pelicans had that was because they lost their last game to the Minnesota Timberwolves. I don't know if I made videos talking about all the different scenarios. It was actually getting really complicated to forecast what would happen. So we had to wait for last night's game in order to make this video. But the NBA bracket is set. Number 3, Philadelphia 76ers taking on the Brooklyn Nets. And in the Western Conference, the Sacramento Kings will be taking on the Golden State Warriors. In the Eastern Conference, the Cleveland Cavaliers taking on the New York Knicks. And in the Western Conference, we're going to see the Phoenix Suns taking on the Los Angeles Clippers. Now, in the Eastern Conference, I forecast the Philadelphia 76ers and the New York Knicks are going to move on. That's what I forecasted. For the Western Conference, though, I never really had that much time to go through and look at the respective data sets. And a big reason why I struggled to do that was because it just came out and I was on a college tour in Connecticut today. So I didn't really have time to check. So there'll be a video at some point where I then go through and talk about who I think are going to be my favorites in the Western Conference. I might wait for that video until some of the seeds get set out, because soon we're going to start the play-in tournament. April 11th is one game, and I'm not sure the other game is on like April 13th or 14th. But essentially, the first game in the play-in tournament in the Eastern Conference is going to be between the Miami Heat and the Atlanta Hawks. In the Western Conference, it's between the Los Angeles Lakers and Minnesota Timberwolves. That's one of the games, and it's probably the more important game, because that determines who goes up against the 2 seed. In the Eastern Conference, it's the Boston Celtics. In the Western Conference, Memphis Grizzlies. Meanwhile, as far as the other game, the 9-10 less important game, we have in the Eastern Conference, the Toronto Raptors facing the Chicago Bulls. In the Western Conference, the New Orleans Pelicans, who are taking on the Oklahoma City Thunder. Now, the thing about this game is that the 7-8 game will control the 7 seed, who faces off against that. So the 7 seed gets determined faster than the 8 seed. The 8 seed also has more opportunities. The only 7 and 8 have a chance of earning the number 7 seed, but anywhere from 7 to 10 could be the 8 seed. But as the 7-8 game goes on, the 9-10 game goes on, that game is less important, though, because all we need from that is the winner. The loser's out. And they place the loser of the 7-8 game to determine control of that seed. I will say we're probably going to see 7 and 8 get the 2 spots, and probably 7 gets 7, 8 gets 8. But last year, both of the 9 seeds beat both of the 8 seeds to kick them out of the playoffs. So you never know. But what you got to understand is that the 9 and 10 seed, they have to win 2 games. 7 and 8 only have to win 1. So when you look at the chances, it's pretty good that you wind up getting the 7 and 8 seeds moving on. Now, I'm going to try to see what I think is going to happen in certain events, but it's really hard to talk about this, and I'm going to mainly focus on the Eastern Conference, because the Western Conference, I really don't have a clue on half these teams. I mean, like, if the Lakers move on, could they put some kind of magic together? Maybe. The Golden State Warriors, could they put some magic against the Sacramento Kings? Probably. But it's hard to say what's going to happen for sure. I think that if the Miami Heat get into the 7th seed, though, they have a chance against the Boston Celtics. Last year, the Heat lost to the Boston Celtics, but it was because they missed a 3-point shot in Game 7. the Miami Heat got really close to making it to the NBA Finals. They were one shot away from making it to the NBA Finals. Very close game between them and the Celtics. And I think that absolutely they could put up a good fight against the Boston Celtics if they get into the 7th seed. However, 7 hasn't really been able to beat 2 yet. We haven't seen it happen. So I think that in that case, we're going to still see the Celtics come out on top if it was the Heat. If the Atlanta Hawks get the number 7 seed, however, I think it's pretty much a done deal that the Boston Celtics are going to be beating the Atlanta Hawks in that scenario. Now, if the Hawks are against the Milwaukee Bucks, which I personally see as the most likely, I still see the Milwaukee Bucks winning. They're just like dominating over everyone. Actually, really, no matter who the Bucks' opponent is, I see them moving on. Celtics, I also see them moving on, pretty much no matter what, but the Miami Heat could pose a few problems for them. I remember someone saying a risky take on how the Toronto Raptors might have been able to beat the Boston Celtics in the wild card round, but now they don't even have the opportunity to, being stuck in the 9 seed. And I see the Raptors, if they make it into the playoffs at all, getting squished by the Milwaukee Bucks with little resistance, really. In the Western Conference, again, it's more tricky to forecast. But that's what I see playing out. So, if my predictions for the Eastern Conference are correct, we'll see the Milwaukee Bucks, Boston Celtics, Philadelphia 76ers, and the New York Knicks move on. Western Conference, haven't really gotten to that yet. I'll have to update my predictions depending on who gets it through the play-in, and maybe then I'll look more closely at the Western Conference. I mainly focus on the Eastern Conference because that affects the Philadelphia 76ers the most. So, assuming this bracket holds out, unfortunately, I do see the Philadelphia 76ers getting eliminated by the Boston Celtics. I also see the Milwaukee Bucks beating the New York Knicks. This would mean we're probably going to see a Celtics versus Bucks Eastern Conference final. And in this scenario, I see the Boston Celtics moving on. Remember, they recently beat the Bucks by 41 points. They squished them. The Bucks might have a better record, but the Celtics are probably better than the Bucks head-to-head. Which means that I do unfortunately see the Boston Celtics moving on into the NBA Finals. Meanwhile, in the Western Conference, it's hard for me to exactly forecast what's going to happen in each of these different convoluted rounds. But I do think it's pretty likely that the Denver Nuggets come out victorious on all of that and face off against the Celtics. I do see the Nuggets being the one to take on the Celtics in the NBA Finals, and I think we might see the Celtics beat them, or the Nuggets could win. I don't know. Very difficult for me to forecast. I think I might do some bracketing in a little bit, maybe once the playoffs start. Might do a little bit of a bracketing video to formalize my predictions a little bit. Then yes, there is the 7 versus 2 prejudice that comes in. Although it is understandable because like 7's never beaten 2 before, at least not that I know of. I mean, the Dolphins sure came close, but they couldn't beat the Bills, thank God. So that's just kind of my forecast this far out. And you know, I'd love to see upsets. There probably are going to be upsets. I mean, just look at upsets. You know, upsets can be really common sometimes. I mean, just looking at the baseball and football playoffs this year, we already saw quite a few upsets. I mean, did people really think that the Blue Jays would fall to the Mariners? I mean, some people might have, but the Blue Jays were probably the favorites. They had 2 more wins over the Mariners, and yet the Seattle Mariners, hadn't been to the playoffs in over 2 decades, and yet they still beat them. Now, I want to say the Padres were favorites to the Mets, even though they had 12 fewer wins. I don't think anyone was expecting the Philadelphia Phillies to beat the St. Louis Cardinals. From there, both the Padres and Phillies pulled off upsets by beating the Dodgers and the Braves. So, again, tons of upsets going on in that series. Now, in football, I don't want to say there were as many upsets, but a lot of people predicted the Jacksonville Jaguars were going to lose to the Los Angeles Chargers, and they won. I also think that the New York Giants beating the Minnesota Vikings, who had 3.5 games ahead of them, was a bit of a surprise. As far as the Cowboys versus the Buccaneers game, as that being a surprise, a lot of people did think that Tom Brady could pull some magic and that the Buccaneers going up against the Cowboys probably meant that the Cowboys might have lost. On the other hand, the Cowboys had 4 wins over the Buccaneers, so it would have been really hard for the Buccaneers to have overcame that. I've seen that before, but I do ultimately in the end think that that was not really that big of an upset. And, there were some other games in the NFL postseason that were an upset. Bengals losing to the Chiefs. That was a bit of an upset. Considering that the Bengals beat them last year in the AFC Championship, and in the regular season, the Bengals beat the Chiefs. So, certainly think that was an upset. The Eagles losing in the Super Bowl. The Eagles were slight favorites to win. So, I mean, just think about it, and yeah. But this video was meant to forecast what is probably going to happen in the basketball playoffs. My ideal scenario would be the Philadelphia 76ers winning and the Boston Celtics getting out in a wild card round. But I highly doubt that's going to happen. And I think that this NBA playoffs is going to make me a little bit sad when I realize what the result was. But I am excited to see what the bracketing is going to be like. Please, Philadelphia 76ers, at the very least, do not get out in a wild card round to the Brooklyn Nets.